Some Portuguese verbs are straight up confusing. They seem to mean the same thing, but they have a very subtle difference. You end up using them incorrectly and feeling like a dummy. I'm talking about poder and conseguir, saber and conhecer, achar and pensar, andar and caminhar. There's loads. So if these verbs have left your head in a spin, then the next few minutes is for you, because I'm going to break down the difference between these very common verbs and how you should be using them correctly. So if you're excited for this video, give it a like and hit subscribe if you haven't already, and practical Portuguese lessons are what you need, because that's what I do. So let's start with the difference between saber and conhecer. They both mean to know. But what's the subtle difference between them, and when should we use each one? Well, saber is when we are talking about specific knowledge of things, whereas a good description for the verb conhecer is whether you are familiar with something, and this usually refers to people or places. So let's use them in some sentences and you can see the difference. Sabes a que horas vamos almoçar? Do you know what time we're gonna eat lunch? Sabes falar francês? Do you know how to speak French? Conheces Lisboa? Conheces a Jéssica? This last one could actually translate to, have you met Jessica before? So as you can see, in kind of broad terms, saber is when you know a thing or how to do something, and conhecer is usually whether you are familiar with or know about a person or place. So what about poder and conseguir? This is a really tricky one because they both mean to be able to. The way I usually describe it is, conseguir is about whether you are physically able to do something or not. Poder is about having the permission to do that thing or requesting that somebody else do it. So let's listen to some examples. They're both going to involve the window, but because I'm going to use different verbs, they're going to have slightly different meanings. So, consegues abrir a janela? Can you open the window? A more accurate translation would be, are you able to open the window? Physically, can you reach it? Now, if I say, podes abrir a janela, por favor? This now becomes a request. Can you open the window, please? If I respond and say, não posso abrir a janela, this is going to imply that I physically could open the window, but I shouldn't. I don't have the permission to do it. If I said, não consigo abrir a janela, using the verb conseguir, it would be because I physically cannot do it, I can't reach it, or some other reason like that. Another situation using each of the verbs and explaining the difference between them. I could say, posso sentar-me aqui? Can I sit here? More like, may I sit here? I'm asking for the permission. If I say, não consigo sentar-me aqui, I cannot sit here, what's implied there is I physically cannot sit there, it's too uncomfortable, for example. These can be really tricky to get your head around, so if you need some help remembering it, I do have a Confusing Verbs workbook that you can download. The link is going to be in the description. It has these examples and a few more tests for you to put your knowledge to the test when you've studied this. So what about the difference between achar and pensar? They both mean to think, so what's the difference? Well, again, usually with these verbs, one is usually a very literal translation and one is a little bit more abstract. So in this sense, pensar is the verb that really means to think about something, okay? So for example, estou a pensar em ti. I am thinking about you. Whereas achar can be a little bit more abstract. It's more about what I feel, what I believe, not thinking specifically about something. So I might say, acho que preciso de corte de cabelo. I think I need a haircut. I'm not thinking about something, it's a feeling, it's a belief that I have. It's also important to note that in Brazil, the verb achar will be used to find something. Achei a minha carteira. I found my purse. So again, we can also use it in kind of this figurative way in Portuguese to say, I found it interesting. Achei interessante. The difference between andar and caminhar is also one that I get asked all the time, particularly by my own students. Again, they both seem to mean to walk, so what's the difference? So, which one is our more literal one and which one is the more figurative one? Well, caminhar is the more literal one. This means to put one foot in front of the other and to walk. So, for example, going on a hike is fazer uma caminhada. We're using that verb as a noun there. Now, andar is our more abstract one, not the literal one. So we're actually going to be able to use this in more context, but it generally means movement. I think if you look this up in the Portuguese dictionary, it has like 19 different definitions. So we can use this in a lot of context. For example, andar de bicicleta means to move on a bike, so to cycle. Andar a pé means to go on foot. So this is where we get that sense of walking. But also we could use it in terms of whether something functions or not, again, when it's related to movement. So I could say, este carro não anda. This car doesn't move, it doesn't work. We can also use andar to talk about being engaged in an activity. So I could ask you, o que andas a fazer? What are you up to? What are you doing? So this is another context that you might have heard the verb andar in and started to get confused. You can probably think of tons more verbs that you have found confusing, so why not leave me a note in the comments and tell me which other ones you need help with. I'll happily make another video like this explaining exactly how to use each one. If you want a little bit more practice, as I mentioned, I have a Confusing Verbs workbook that is available for you to download for free in the description. So if you want to practice this a little bit more, help to memorize them and also to test yourself, then go check that out. I'll be back next week with more tips and tutorials for practical Portuguese in plain English. So if that's what you're looking for, I hope that I will see you there. Ciao for now.